Hello everybody, welcome to this week's edition of Pigskin Preview. Danny Daniels along with David Johnson. And 5 games coming up this week. George Walton is off, and we'll talk about the Bulldogs briefly in a few minutes. But first of all, David, Monroe area going up to Stevens County, always a tough place to play. Stevens a little bit down this year, but you can't take anything for granted when you play at the reservation.
No, it's one of the most storied places in Georgia high school football. It's a neat setting up in the mountains this time of year especially. But yeah, this team is down, a traditional state powerhouse. They've suffered their last game. They actually were shut out for the first time in like 12 years. And that was in the postseason. I didn't even check their last regular season shutout. But it's interesting little tidbit that that shutout was when Coach Winslet, Charlie Winslet, was their head coach. Of course, he's an assistant at Monroe now, so he's familiar with that territory. Hopefully, he can help Monroe get a little acclimated. Again, Monroe should take care of business here. Stevens County is just not that. They lost 17 seniors last year, and they're clearly rebuilding this year.
You would think that Monroe would need to be challenged a little bit, because down the line in the postseason they're going to play a close ball game, and they haven't played one yet, and they might need a little stress test. I don't know that Stevens is going to provide it, but you don't want to walk over everybody and then have everything tightened up when you get to the playoffs.
Which it will, no
yeah.
doubt. I talked to Coach Fleck about that this week. I asked him about, what you really haven't been tested. I guess Lanier was within a couple of touchdowns, the final score, but even then they were pretty much, pretty comfortable. And he says, they talk about that. He talks about that with his team and tells them they need to be ready, but you don't want to go out there and spot the other team 21 points. And
yeah.
At this point, that's really probably about the only way up until Chestatee they're going to have that situation. When the Chestatee game rolls around, yeah, they could be tested for 60 minutes. But right now, you look down their schedule, and again, outside of just spotting the other team's points heading into the game, what can you do? It is what it is, and they're an explosive team, and there's not a whole lot of people. As I said before the season started, I'd be shocked if anybody stayed within 3 touchdowns of them.
And they hadn't so far. Monroe's ranked 4th in Class 4A. So where Sandy Creek got tied last week. Did you see who they played?
I thought they got tied earlier in the season.
Okay, maybe it was.
I think one of the out-of-state games they played. I can't remember, but yeah, they've got a tie on there. But I don't think it's really. Didn't affect their region or playoff hopes. And not a whole lot of teams going to stay with them, as Monroe's found out the past few years. Yeah,
Monroe and Loganville both. All right, that game starts at 7:30 at the reservation on Friday night up in Toccoa. Loganville's going to be at Appalachia. It's a must-win ball game. All right, another game to talk about. Loganville's going to be at Appalachia over in Barrow County. And, David, it's a must-win for the Red Devils if they got any playoff hopes alive.
Yeah, they put themselves in a spot earlier in the season where they pretty much got to win out, or at least win the games they're supposed to win, and one more that they're not. Of course, they have Gainesville coming up, and I know what happened last year. I would bet on that happening 2 times in a row.
Yeah.
And then they've got Heritage coming up, which Heritage was one of the 4 teams that was predicted to make the playoffs from this region. So Loganville's got to beat one of those 4 teams. They've already lost to Clark. They've lost to Flowery Branch. If you throw in, they're going to lose to Gainesville. They probably need to beat Heritage. And if you look at Heritage, they've really struggled some this year. They look vulnerable. Cedar Shoals took them to overtime. They really had a hard game with Wander Barrow last week or a couple weeks ago. They look beatable, and so if Loganville can take care of business these next couple of weeks, they have Appalachia, who's not won yet. They have Wander the next week, who's won just once. If they can take care of business in those 2 games, come back home and beat Heritage, they have a clear path to the playoffs. I think if they can win the next 3, I think they'll be playing in postseason.
That'd be fun. Talking about Gainesville and what happened last year. Bad part, Gainesville's also going to remember what happened last year.
Yeah, they're not. I assure you, they'll be reminded very clearly.
So they won't be overlooking Loganville. And I'm not saying that they were last year, but you got to look at the records and figured that was a winnable ball game for them. But anyway, we'll worry about Gainesville later on. Right now, it's Appalachia's going to be over in Barron County at 7:30. Walnut Grove is going to be at home, and I think it's homecoming for the Warriors against Chestatee team that sort of been up and down a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know who planned this homecoming. I don't think I would have picked Chestatee to be my homecoming opponent there. Yeah, they've kind of not been quite as strong as they had the past few years, but they're still a very good team. In fact, I would think that's really Monroe's next big hurdle to defending their region championship. It's going to be that game later in the year. Walnut Grove, they've shown some signs of life offensively. They've been pretty consistent and really you can kind of tell they're coming around a little bit. Going to have a hard time against this Chestatee defense. They shut out Stevens County. They were the ones that gave Stevens County that shutout loss a couple weeks ago. So, and that's going to be up at Gainesville, so that's going to be a tough one. But again, just it's baby steps and just trying to get better every week and show some improvement. And so there's just another chance for them to get out and do that.
They're still working hard over there. When you talk to Ben Reeves, he's as optimistic as ever. I saw the quote in the paper where he said that they're just not a very good football team right now. And I think eventually they will be, but you're right, it's not going to be a day and night situation.
It's going to take time. But again, it's consistency. It's keeping a coach there for more than a year or two. And putting that system in, developing the trust of the players and being able to put in your system. And I think if he can stay there and do that, I think they're going to come around and do some good things.
And kudos to the Warrior Nation over there. They continued to pack those stands on Friday night, so they hadn't given up on anybody. So keep that positive outlook over at Walnut Grove, and eventually it's going to pay off. Social Circle is going to be at Oglethorpe County, two teams who have not won a football game.
Yeah, so you'd think unless they just have a tie, which wouldn't that be brutal, somebody's going to come away with a win here. Oglethorpe's looked a little stronger, although, again, they haven't come away with a win. Social Circle, 18 points all year, 3 shutouts already, 3 shutout losses. I don't know what more we can say. This is just a team that's really a program that's really struggling, and it just seems to get harder every week. Again, on paper, this looks like it's a chance for them to snap that 25-game losing skid. But again, they've just got to find a way to move the ball and get it in the end zone and then somehow stop the other team. And so 0-5, 2 0-5 teams, we'll see what happens.
I was thinking, if you want to get realistically depressing, one of their coaches, I believe, told me their middle school program hadn't won since 2009. So, you can't even look at the light. And again, we don't want to be negative, but you got to be truthful. I don't know when help is coming for that program.
Yeah, well, it's crazy. Some of these businesses that are opening in that area, they've got to bring in families to they're supposed to create a lot of jobs over there. So you never know. These families move in. Of course, they can pick where they move to. They look at a program that hasn't won in 2 or 3 years. They may think twice about moving in there if they have a kid that plays ball. But again, they will have some, presumably they'll have some folks moving in, maybe moving in the Social Circle area. Maybe there'll be a ringer or two that's willing to come in there and really seize an opportunity to step in and be a part of turning things around. And, I think that's a light at the end of the tunnel, possibly, if that can happen. And, like Coach Seabury told me, he sits there in his office sometimes waiting for that doorknob to turn, and then walks, that 5-star player. So, stranger things have happened. Hopefully that will for them.
Well, they did in Loganville with Storm Johnson coming from Beaufort, and where would Monroe area be without Stanton Truitt, who came from Peachtree Ridge? I don't know if that's a good example or not, because Michael Gallup stepped in well for him last year, so they're very deep. But yeah, one player can make a big difference.
Oh yeah, you can get more so in basketball than football, but yeah, you get a guy in there, you get a stud running back or a quarterback that's a game breaker. Yeah, it's not going to take that much to at least start winning a few games. To me, if this team can, win 2 or 3 games in a year for a couple of years, that's a vast improvement over what we're looking at now, where they're not only not winning, they're not even really being competitive, which is the situation they're facing right now.
All right, George Walton's going to be off on Friday night. They had a big win over Hebron last week, so it was a good week for the Dogs to be off.
Yeah, it's a good week injury-wise. They're still missing those two key players, a defensive lineman, their starting middle linebacker. So yeah, if for nothing else, it gives them a week off to heal up. They clearly had a heaper and overmatched last week. Those 20 points that they gave up was largely against their backups. They're basically their JV team they're putting in there. So the defense looks strong. The offense, you have. It was really a coming out party for Demetrius Mason last week. We all know about Stanley Williams. He's going to get his 200 yards and 4 touchdowns every week. But Demetrius Mason, a sophomore wide receiver, came in, touched the ball 4 times, scored 3 touchdowns last week. Really, just a really amazing athlete, and you can kind of see him coming around. I think he's better on defense, frankly, at cornerback. He's a shutdown corner. Really looks solid back there, but yeah, he had a big game last week, which really helps take up some of the pressure off of Stanley Williams, because everybody knows he's getting the ball. Everybody knows they have to key on him and do something to try and slow him down. So, if Demetrius can be that other person to go to, that's going to be so much better, because George Walton, after this week off, is really facing a tough road coming down with Athens Academy, with Prince Avenue. They've got some tough games coming up down the stretch here.
All right, Loganville Christian Academy is going to be on the road at Horizon on Friday night. The Lions, undefeated, is 6-0 and headed what you would think would be a second consecutive state championship in that private school league. So good luck to Coach Andre King and the Lions on Friday night. And again, I'm not sure if that's a 7 or a 7:30 kickoff. I'm sure they can tell you at the school. Anyway, lots of big games. Hope you'll get out and see high school football this Friday night. Dave and I'll see you next week.